You do not only use 10% of your brain. Columbus did not actually discover America. Medieval people knew the Earth was round, and Einstein did not fail math. Some of the most common lessons we learned in school were not exactly true. In the 10th place, bulls and the color red, a classic myth from childhood textbooks and Saturday morning cartoons. The story goes that matadors wave a red cape because bulls are enraged by the color itself. But science tells a different story. Bulls are dichromats, meaning they see only two color channels, blue and green. Red? It just looks like another shade of gray. What actually triggers a bull's charge in the ring is motion, not color. The swirling cape, whether red, blue, or white, would have the same effect. The tradition of using red dates back to Spanish bullfighting, where the color was chosen mainly to mask blood and add drama for the crowd. This harmless myth stuck around thanks to spectacle and repetition, not animal psychology. But that is nothing compared to the next misconception, one that could put entire cities at risk. Number 9. The idea that a tornado cannot hit big cities. Many people grow up believing that urban skylines somehow shield downtown areas from twisters, as if concrete and steel can block the forces of nature. The truth is, tornadoes don't care about city limits or skyscrapers. They follow the atmosphere, not a map. Urban areas make up only about 3% of the land in the United States. So statistically, tornadoes hit open country more often. But when a tornado does strike a city, the results are devastating. In 2008, an EF2 tornado ripped straight through downtown Atlanta, shattering glass towers and causing $500 million in damage. Oklahoma City, St. Louis, and even the Chicago suburbs have all seen direct hits. NOAA records confirm more than a dozen major cities have been struck since 1890. The myth persists because city strikes are rare, not impossible. But as urban sprawl grows and severe weather shifts, the odds and the risks are rising. And if you thought nature was unpredictable, wait until you hear about the world's most famous scientist and his so-called failing grades. 8th place. The story that Albert Einstein failed math. For generations, students have found comfort in the idea that the world's most famous physicist, Einstein, once flunked his equations. The truth is, Einstein was a standout math student from an early age. By the age of 12, he was working through advanced calculus on his own, and his school records from Switzerland show top marks across every math subject. The confusion started with a grading scale switch. In Einstein's time, a 6 meant excellent and a 1 meant failing. But the system was reversed. Later, when biographers and journalists read his old transcripts, they mistook high scores for failing grades. The myth took off, repeated in newspapers and classrooms as a reassuring tale that even geniuses struggle. In reality, Einstein's challenge was with rigid schooling, not math itself. But if a grading mix-up can rewrite a legacy, imagine what a single quote can do to a queen's reputation. Number 7. The infamous line, "Let them eat cake." For centuries, Marie Antoinette has been painted as the queen who sneered at starving peasants, tossing out this callous phrase at the height of France's bread crisis. But history tells a different story. The quote first appears in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions, written around 1765, when Antoinette was just a child in Austria, years before she ever set foot in France. No reliable document from the Revolution links those words to her, and the earliest attributions come decades after her execution. Revolutionary pamphlets and political cartoons seized on the phrase, turning the queen into a symbol of aristocratic indifference. The myth stuck because it was perfect for propaganda, simple, damning, and unforgettable. But the real Antoinette was more complicated, and so is the truth behind this famous quip. If a single sentence can rewrite a reputation, what happens when an entire ERA gets labeled as dark and ignorant? For generations, textbooks and classroom stories painted the Middle Ages as a time of superstition and ignorance, where scholars supposedly believed the world ended at the horizon. But medieval manuscripts and university curricula tell a different story. From the early Middle Ages onward, educated Europeans accepted that the Earth was a sphere. Astronomers calculated its circumference, and navigators used this knowledge to chart their courses. Works like Bede's 8th century histories and Sacrobosco's medieval textbooks openly described a round Earth. The flat Earth myth did not take hold until the 19th century, when writers like John William Draper and Andrew Dixon White used it to frame the Middle Ages as backward, fueling a narrative of progress from darkness to enlightenment. The real misconception is not about medieval science, it is about how later generations rewrote the past. And if you think that is a stretch, wait until you hear what is really visible from outer space. Number 5. The towering myth of the Great Wall of China, supposedly the only man-made structure visible from space. For decades, textbooks and trivia nights have repeated this claim, often picturing astronauts gazing down from the moon and spotting the wall snaking across Asia. But the reality is far less cinematic. The Great Wall averages just a few meters wide, and it blends almost perfectly with the surrounding landscape. Even from low Earth orbit, astronauts say it is nearly impossible to pick out with the naked eye. Cities, highways, and even airport runways stand out much more clearly, especially at night when they are lit up. NASA, the China National Space Administration, and astronauts like Yang Liwei have all confirmed, no, you cannot see the wall from the moon, and spotting it from orbit takes a camera lens, not just sharp eyesight. The myth stuck because it captured the imagination. It felt like proof of human achievement on a planetary scale. But if the wall's grandeur can be exaggerated so easily, what about an entire era labeled as dark and stagnant? The next misconception rewrites the story of 1,000 years of supposed ignorance. Number 4. The so-called Dark Ages, a label that paints 1,000 years of European history as a time of ignorance and stagnation. But the evidence tells a different story. Between 500 CE and 1400 CE, medieval Europe saw sweeping advances in technology, science, and education. The heavy plow revolutionized agriculture, boosting crop yields and supporting growing towns. Monasteries and scholars preserved ancient manuscripts, copying and translating texts that might otherwise have vanished. The first universities emerged in Bologna and Paris, laying the groundwork for modern higher education. Mechanical clocks appeared in the 13th century, changing how people measured time itself. The phrase Dark Ages was popularized by Renaissance thinkers eager to distance themselves from the past, not by historians weighing the facts. Today, scholars recognize this era as a period of transformation, not darkness. But if 1,000 years can be written off with a single phrase, what about the stories we tell about our own origins? Number 3. The claim that humans evolved from monkeys is one of the most persistent misunderstandings in science education. The familiar classroom diagram, a neat line from a knuckle-walking ape to modern human, makes evolution look like a ladder, with monkeys on one rung and humans on the next. But the real story is far more complex. Modern humans and modern monkeys are cousins, not ancestors and descendants. Both groups branched off from a shared ancestor about 25 million years ago. Since then, evolution has unfolded more like a sprawling tree, with different primate lines diverging and adapting in their own directions. Fossil evidence and genetic studies confirm that while we share a deep connection with other primates, no living monkey species gave rise to us. The myth stuck because it is simple, visual, and easy to repeat, but it erases the richness of our evolutionary story. And if textbooks can flatten millions of years into a single cartoon, what happens when they rewrite the story of discovery itself? Coming to the top 3, the story of Christopher Columbus discovering America stands as one of the most persistent classroom myths. The textbook version credits Columbus with finding a new world in 1492, as if the Americas were empty and unknown until his arrival. But millions of indigenous people had lived across these continents for thousands of years, building complex societies long before Columbus set sail. Even among Europeans, Columbus was not the first to reach American shores. Norse explorers led by Leif Erikson landed in Newfoundland around the year 1000, a fact confirmed by archaeological sites like L'Anse aux Meadows. The idea of Columbus as the lone discoverer took off in the 19th century, thanks in part to Washington Irving's dramatic biography, published in 1828, which turned a complicated history into a hero's tale. The myth has stuck around because it fit a national narrative, simplifying centuries of contact and conflict into a single memorable date. But that is nothing compared to the next misconception, a myth about our own minds that almost everyone still believes. And finally, in first place, the myth that we only use 10% of our brain. This idea has echoed through classrooms, self-help books, and Hollywood blockbusters for decades. It sounds both humbling and hopeful. If only we could unlock the other 90%, we would be limitless. But neuroscience tells a very different story. Brain scans, using fMRI and PET technology, show that nearly every region of the brain is active at some point each day, even during sleep. The brain, weighing just 2% of our body mass, burns about 20% of our energy. That kind of metabolic demand would not make sense if most of our neural tissue sat idle. Lesion studies reveal that damage to even small areas can cause profound deficits, proving there is no vast reserve of unused brain. The 10% myth likely began as a misreading of early 20th century science, then took off in popular culture because it promised hidden potential. But the real wonder is not untapped capacity. It is neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt, rewire, and learn throughout life. We use all of it, and the real magic lies in how every part can change and grow. School might have left us dreaming of secret powers, but the truth is even more empowering and much more real. Across all 10 entries, one pattern emerges. The facts we inherit are shaped by culture, habit, and the limits of old knowledge. School gives us a foundation, but knowledge evolves. And sometimes the real story is even more fascinating than the simplified version. Which of these surprised you most?